What's going on, everybody? This is Boxingwave, and I'm just getting home. I wasn't able to do live commentary with you guys tonight, and I apologize about that. But I did watch the whole entire fight, and I was rushing home just to do a review on the fight. So if you're here, I'm assuming that you know what the outcome was of the fight. But shout out, first of all, I wanted to start out by saying shout out to the two fighters for even doing this. All right, both Frank Martin and Michel Rivera, because we knew that there was going to be a lot on the line for this fight. There's now a lot that we really knew about these fighters at this level, because this is their both step up there. This is a step up fight for both. And most of the time, there's some kind of title on the line or a title eliminator or, a mandatory or a championship fight or, two like big names or something like that. Normally when these two guys or these two type of fighters are at this level and they're undefeated and they're still young, they normally don't match them up together this early because both sides are kind of afraid to take that test. They want to see how far they can go without any real dangers. So salute to both of them. But now that we've seen the fight, you know exactly why a lot of these promoters or a lot of these fighters or their team don't want them to move this way, because you can kind of get exposed. And with that being said, Michel Rivera, I look at the scorecards and one judge gave every round to Martin, right? 120 to 107 if you include in the knockdown, because there was a knockdown in the 7th round, right? So you had the 120, 107, you had 110, 117, you had 109 to 118, all for Martin. In my opinion, I don't think you can give Michel Rivera more than 3 rounds. I gave him like 2 rounds. I can see maybe 3 at the very most, but it was a pretty dominant fight, to be honest. I think, I noticed even as early as the 2nd round, that I thought there was a difference in class between the two, and I think in the first half of the fight, it was still anybody's fight, technically, because Michel Rivera had a couple rounds in the bag. But outside of that, I don't think that Frank was ever not in control of this fight. Outside of the first round, Frank seemed to be in control, even in the rounds that I gave to Michel Rivera. Frank always seemed to be in control. And one of those rounds that I gave to Rivera was the first round, which was like a filling out round to me. It wasn't really like he just won just because he was throwing more punches. He was throwing a lot of jabs. But Frank Martin dominated this fight. And he looked like a class above Michel Rivera. Rivera, he has to take it back to the drawing board. I don't know exactly. There's a lot of things that he can change, because me doing a breakdown, if you did see the breakdown, I pointed out both of their flaws. But the reason why I went with Frank Martin at the end is mainly because I thought he was a better defender. He was more explosive and he was more powerful. Now Michel Rivera has a very good jab, but if you're not really landing the jab, because this dude's just parrying everything you throwing at him and his hands are always up, what else are you gonna do? And one key thing that I was mentioning in my breakdown was foot positioning and dominating that lead foot. Michel Rivera is like a guy that is, when he's fighting southpaws, he likes his lead foot to be on. I don't want to say he likes it, but his lead foot is on the inside, and that's good when you try to shoot the jab. But when you're throwing the right cross or whatever, and you're not really hitting the target, especially if Frank is going to be moving to his right. He's a southpaw. He's looking to shoot that left hand. He's good at that lead foot being on the outside. And he's going to shoot that left and then step in and try to do the work on the inside. That was his way of getting on the inside. He was able to easily get on the inside and rough Michel Rivera up and just turn him and spin around him plenty of times. He just had quicker feet. He was a more athletic fighter. And, I was looking for Michel Rivera to make some sort of adjustment. We didn't see that at all. Where were the hooks? Where was a combination? Change up the style. If you're just not just shooting a jab from the outside, change it up. Come in, switch into a high guard, try to walk down Frank. Maybe, I think Frank is better on the inside, but I said this to you guys the other day on a breakdown. Frank is a kind of guy that he's jumping in and out. Like, he's not really looking to be sitting in the pocket with you. He's going to do his work on the inside and then skate out of there. And I felt like Michel Rivera could have changed the pace a little bit, maybe go around into just trying to close the gap and working on the inside, because he could fight on the inside. He could sit in the pocket and scrap and bang. We've seen that in the Jerry Perez fight. But I wouldn't expect Frank to really let that happen if what he's doing is working. What he did was working. As soon as he turned into a different gear, it worked for him, and it continued working for him for the remaining of the fight. And Michel Rivera really didn't change anything in his game. It's just jab, straight right hand, and then he's shooting a right hand from all the way on the outside. He's lunging in, and he kept getting caught with left hand counters. All night Martin was just connecting with pull counters and short left counters. It was just too easy. He was moving to his right and countering him over and over again. And Frank didn't really, I think the one key thing is Frank didn't really turn it up another gear, because I thought like possibly after he knocked him down that Frank was going to really go in. And he had his moments, but for the most part, he kept doing what was working. And it shows, some people tend to get mad at like these periods where certain fighters is winning clearly, but they don't want to turn it up to another level in order to get the stoppage. It just shows how disciplined Frank is when it comes to like just in general. He's disciplined. He's not a guy that's going to change what's working for him. I thought he could have maybe been a little bit more aggressive, but he didn't have to, because he was picking spots to be aggressive, and he was winning that way, clearly bagging up every round, getting those moments, landing those heavy shots, and landing those combinations at times. And no, he didn't put Rivera down again, but maybe that didn't have to do with Frank. Maybe that had to do with Rivera just being a tough fighter, maybe him being durable. He did go down in this fight, but it's not like he was badly hurt. But Frank proved to me, at least, that everything that we saw leading up to this point, that he is still getting better with every fight. And when you step up, no, he didn't get the stoppage this time, but he stepped up. He fought a fighter that people believed he would lose to. Yes, he was a favorite, but he wasn't a heavy favorite. He was a favorite, but it was a slight favorite. He wasn't a heavy favorite. And based on, the videos that I did, and the comments that I've seen, and just people's views on social media, there's a lot of people that thought Michel Rivera would win the fight. It's not like this was one of those fights where it was going to be a blowout going to fight. Nah, a lot of people thought Rivera was going to win this one too. It was a good scrap. A lot of us was looking forward to it. And good win for Frank. He still looked to be improving. In fact, I thought his defense was even more sharp in this fight. He's proven, there's moments like, there's still little things that he do, sometimes when he exits, he goes straight back, and you can kind of counter him on the way out. I've said this before. I've said this about him in a breakdown that I did the other day. He still gets caught with a good shots, but that's part of the game. You got to get hit. You're not going to fight a perfect fight. So he got caught with a couple shots. But at this level, he looks really good. He looks really sharp. Congratulations to him. Michel Rivera needs to work on a few things and get right back in the mix. But congrats to him. Congrats to Derrick James. He has a nice stable. I actually really liked the little the fight preview they did where they were showing Frank and Errol and Jamel Charlo, and they were talking with Derrick James, And salute to him. Good coach, really good coach. I always give him a lot of praise on the channel. He got a nice stable. The one thing that I appreciated that he said, though, that I really liked that he said was that, I don't have a stable of 20 fighters. I got these 3, and I just want to build a relationship with the 3 of them. And I think that's dope. As a trainer, I think that's part of the reason why he's having such success, because he's putting a lot of energy and time in each of his fighters, where he's just not in a gym with a whole bunch of fighters and then he's dealing with all of them. Now he's investing time in each one of his guys there. So I think that's pretty dope. So salute to him. I saw something online about him getting trainer of the year or something like that. If that's true, then that's even greater. I think he's a dope coach. Especially for fighters that are really like front foot heavy fighters. I think he's a good coach, and I recently said I hope Joshua considers going with him. I've said this even last year when Joshua was floating around in the U.S. I like Derrick James. For Joshua, he's kind of already defensive minded, so I think that mix with Derrick James. I like the Robert Garcia. We talked about this the other day, but I like Derrick James. Another thing too, as far as the next opponent for Frank Martin, I was on Twitter earlier. I basically told you, because I want to be realistic. There's a lot of people at 135, but we know that you got the networks and the promoters and stuff like that. That's gonna cause fights not to happen. I know a lot of people have been talking about Keyshawn Davis and Frank Martin. I think a lot of that has to really do with Frank being Arrow's fighter and Keyshawn being over there with Bud and that crew. What I will say is this, and I said this before, maybe on a live somewhere, I'm not with that fight. I thought even before this fight with Frank, I thought Frank was just a little bit further ahead in his career. He's a little older. He has more fights in. I thought that, regardless of how you feel about Keyshawn and his ability, he looks amazing. He looks incredible. I just saw him last week, and he's a good fighter. And he's definitely, very much more experienced with him being an Olympian. But with that being said, I still want to see Keyshawn keep growing, And I didn't like the idea of having that fight right now. I think that fight could happen at some point, but I never was into that. I thought that was just a Arrow and Bud Crawford thing. The reason why is they were getting mentions, and it's cool. Listen, if they were to fight tomorrow, I would love it. I think Keyshawn is moving ahead, and I don't think I don't believe he needs as many fights to get to where Frank is at. But at the same time, that's not a fight that I'm interested in right now, because I want to see what Keyshawn is able to do. Just like Michel Rivera, just like Frank Martin. I don't really know what Keyshawn could do once he steps up. I want to really be able to see him step up and grow and continue improving. You know what I'm saying? Which he is. Now, as far as everybody, like other realistic fights I see Isaac Cruz being a realistic opponent for Frank Martin. He's PBC. You know what I'm saying? He hasn't had anything crazy no crazy fights since the Tank Davis fight. I think Rolly Romero, somebody he actually called out. That's a realistic. He called out Rolly Romero, called out Devin Haney, who's a champ, and he also called out Tank. I see Rolly Romero and Isaac Cruz being the most realistic. I think that if Tank doesn't fight Ryan Garcia, and I still don't believe that fight actually happens. I don't believe it happens for whatever reason. I don't believe it's going to happen. I said it's not happening until 2024. You know what I'm saying? And I still stand by that. It's not going to happen any earlier than 2024. If I'm wrong, that's great. But I don't see it happening. I think this is all built up. But with that being said, I think Tank would be the top person for Frank Martin to face, obviously. And it'll be the most realistic one that can make, because they're both PBC at the end of the day. But I see Isaac Cruz and Rolly Romero being like realistic opponents, like next opponents. I think Isaac Cruz, I've always said, I think that Isaac Cruz, the reason why he hasn't taken these guys fights over there on Golden Boy with Ryan Garcia or with Shakur Stevenson is because I think the PBC and Showtime is saving Isaac Cruz, being that he went the distance with Tank. They're either saving him as a replacement for Tank, maybe having a rematch with him, or saving him from one of their fighters that's going to come up, like a Frank Martin. And I think that is a realistic fight, Frank Martin and Isaac Cruz, or Frank Martin against Rolly Romero. All right. And if not that, if Frank happens to get lucky, be Tank, you know. But speaking on Tank, I will say that part of the reason why I picked Frank at the end, it was just something about that confidence he had after sparring Tank Davis. You know, he talked about it. I remember watching the interview, and that played in the back of my mind when I was coming to a final decision on who I was going to pick, being that I didn't have that much on these two. And there were fights that I wanted to do film study that weren't available for me to watch. And part of the reason why I picked Frank at the end is that, or if that sparring session, I know it's just sparring. I don't like to base everything on sparring unless we saw it. But he would seem to be so confident after getting out of the ring with Tank Davis, and I was kind of feeling that, you know. But good fight for him. You know, he looks great. You know, he tightened up the defense for this fight. He was quick. He was smart. I love the counters. I love the speed. And I love the I love how disciplined he continued to fight while winning. You know, he didn't really get too reckless in there. So, you know, Michel Rivera, listen, it's not the end. Just continue improving. You know, work on this. Look at it as an eye opener. You got one loss. It doesn't really matter. As long as you just capitalize off whatever, you know, mistakes you made, get better, work on things, keep going. And that's it, you know. I will look forward to seeing both of these guys again at some point. All right, so anyway, that's my review of the fight, man. Y'all have a good night. I'm out of here. I'm going to get some rest. I'll see you guys on the next one. Have a good night. Peace.